Welcome to the May 16th meeting of the Kingston Planning Board. Starting the meeting at 6:46, and I'd like to start by introducing the people that are here. So to my left and your right is Dennis Quintel, our town engineer, followed by Steve Hadfield, planning board member, Rob Trisolo, planning board member, Peter Coffin, planning board member. My name is Lynn Merrill. I am the chair. Robin Carter is our administrative assistant. Chris Bashaw is the selectman's representative. Peter Bakey is a planning board member, and Robin Duguay is the vice chair. And Glenn Greenwood, last but not least, is our town planner. Just so that you understand the way the evening works tonight, it is a public hearing night. That means that the applicant will give a presentation as to what they plan to do with their property. It will be followed by questions from the planning board. We'll have reports from our town departments, our engineer and our planner, and then we'll have a little bit more back and forth, and we'll have a public comment period. And that's for each of the two hearings that are here tonight. So if you happen to be here for the hearing having to do with housing support at 186 Main Street in Kingston, that hearing is about to be continued to another date. If you stay a few more minutes, you'll find out that date. And the other hearing that was going to be tonight was Summit Distributing. That is also being continued to another date, and we'll be voting on that shortly. So if you're here for those, we don't want you to hang around waiting for it to happen and not have it happen. So we are going to deal with those things first on the agenda. So do I have a motion? We do have a note from Housing Support, Inc. They have asked to continue the meeting to our next public hearing night, which happens to be June 20th. We want to be continuing that to 6:45 p.m. The reason they're asking for this is apparently the attorneys are talking back and forth. The attorneys for the abutters and the attorneys for housing support are talking and trying to come up with something that will work for them. We have indeed, as a committee, forwarded the remarks from the planner and the engineer to them, because just because they come to an agreement does not necessarily mean that the planning board will feel that that meets the town regulations. So they forwarded that to them as well. So, in a nutshell, that's what's happening with housing support. Do we have a motion to continue that?
Yeah, let me make a motion that on the request of the applicant that the housing support hearing be continued to June 20th, 2023 at 6:45 p.m. at the town hall.
Second. Do we have any discussion?
Do you have time for new plans?
I don't think there's going to be any new plans.
Okay, let's just say if there are new plans, they need to be in the planning office by Thursday the 15th, or is it, do you want them in by the 8th so they can go to the department heads?
I guess by the 8th.
Yeah, or by any new plans will be required to be submitted by 8 June at noon at the planning office.
Yeah. Robin seconds. Any further discussion? Seeing none, those in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. And the Summit Distributing hearing is being continued as well. It is being continued because the planning board and the zoning board have both sent that forward, have notified the town of Brentwood of the regional impact, and we needed a certain number of days to do that by. So therefore that needs to be continued, so that we make certain that that criteria is indeed legally in place. So do we have a motion to continue that hearing to June 6th?
Go ahead.
So moved.
Do you want to give the date time certain and?
Yep, request to continue to June 6, 2023, 6:45 p.m. And
Pending
ZBA approval.
I'll second that.
Okay. Motion made by Chris Bashaw, seconded by Peter Coffin. Any further discussion? All those
to take a vote, we're required to.
For regional impact.
Regional impact,
We did take a vote at our last
No,
meeting.
I'm sorry, I'm talking about the ones that are coming up tonight. You know,
Oh.
the first one, I don't even think we need to vote because it's not a development. The second one, it may qualify as a development, but we could discuss.
Well,
But I don't think it's a big
it's a site
issue.
plan review, yeah.
It is a site plan review, and it's, oh, you mean the first one?
The second one,
Second one.
The second one is a design review.
design review rather,
This
yeah.
is just design review.
So is that required that we do regional impact for design
You can
review?
certainly
No, you can
discuss,
start
you can discuss with the applicant whether or not you think that that would be
Yeah.
something that would happen upon their application. But
Right, yeah.
that's what we should do when
Yes.
that hearing is open.
So that's really good. What we're trying to avoid is scheduling hearings before we've made that determination.
Right,
And so, if we can get in the habit of anytime we have something come in, we look at it and just, even in a meeting on a non-hearing night, we can just make that determination. 9 times out of 10, it's not gonna affect us. So it's the 1 time in 10 that's gets it.
sounds good.
All right, thanks.
Any further discussion before we begin our public hearings? Seeing none. First public hearing is LER Realty Corp. and Lawrence Cheney Trust, 15 and 13 Cheney Road, map R23-65 and R23-66. This is a lot line adjustment application. The applicant's proposing to convey 3.78 acres from lot 65, a 20-acre parcel, to lot 66, which is a 0.85 acre parcel. Also tonight, they've asked to waive 3 different things: the mandatory preliminary review, the engineering cost, they've asked for a reduction, and to require a full boundary survey of both parcels. Good evening.
Good evening. It's been a while.
Yes.
Hope everybody's doing well.
You joined the Beard Club.
Yeah. Your appearance
Changing
has
things up a
changed.
little bit, right? Yeah, it has been a while. Hopefully everybody can see the presentation board over there. I bought a pointer so I can kind of show you a little bit on the board, and then I'll flip the page and we get into a little bit more detail. But I have a brief presentation I'm going to read through the record here. How are you? And I do have a comment letter from Glenn, probably get into afterwards. So, for the record, Charlie Zilch from SCC and Associates, here on behalf of LER Realty Company, as well as the Lawrence Cheney Trust, of which Bob Griffin is the trustee of both. So these are both of his properties. And as you mentioned, this is an application to adjust the lot lines between tax lot R2365, which is located 15 Cheney Road, and tax lot R2366 at 13 Cheney Road. So on the board, this parcel here is the larger of the 2 parcels, and then it also involves this little smaller parcel right here on the north side of Cheney Road. So just kind of give you a description of each parcel as we run through it. So tax lot R2366, this is an old lot of record, contains only 0.83 acres and 113.5 feet of frontage on the north side of Cheney Road. On that lot, and you might be better off looking at sheet 2. So that lot supports a 4-bedroom single-family dwelling that was constructed perhaps in around the late 1840s. The dwelling served by its own individual septic system and a well. Access is from a large gravel parking area shared with the abutting land for which the application is prepared. So the lot is entirely within the RR zone as well as the Aquifer Protection District. So as everybody kind of see how that lot's laid out, it's a small lot, kind of triangular in shape. The second lot, R2365, this is much larger, and that parcel contains 20 acres. This kind of wraps around lot 66 on both the north side, west side, and east side and the south. It wraps all the way around. It has frontage on both sides of Cheney Road around this lot. So it's got on the, let's see, the frontage to the east, southeast of 66. So where it wraps around on the south side of lot 66. It has 222 feet of frontage, and then on the west side of that lot, it has almost 790 feet of frontage. So there's quite a bit of frontage on this lot on Cheney Road. So on that property, that supports several buildings, as you can see on that second sheet, and they're all west of lot 66. Immediately adjacent to the lot is a building that was built about 1940. That served as one of the buildings that was used for the mill across the street. I don't know if anybody's real familiar with the property across the street. That's the old mill building at the edge of the river there. And so this mill building more or less served as an office for that. Since that mill is no longer active, this is more or less just a storage building. And then to the west of that, you'll see there's several other storage buildings over there. There is one other building that's also on the same lot, and that's to the south and southeast of the smaller lot. And that's what was an old store or a single-family dwelling one time, and now it's kind of in a state of disrepair. It's just a storage building. He just uses it for storage. So is everybody familiar with that? Any questions about the lot layouts or any of the buildings on the lots? Okay, so the intent of the plan is very simple. It's to add land from lot 65, and that's the land area that wraps around lot 66. So as you know, 65 is a much larger lot, 66 is a much smaller lot. We're looking to just take some of that land area to the north, east, and southeast of lot 65 and add it to 66. So this will increase lot 66 to 4.6 acres, which is reflecting or exceeding the current zoning lot area requirement within the Aquifer Protection District. As you know, it's a 3-acre lot sizing in there. We're going to go from 0.3 acres or 0.83 acres up to 4.6 acres. So the other added benefit too is that lot is poorly defined by deed. We had a tough time trying to survey this parcel, and so we tied into those surrounding subdivisions, and we've also surveyed a bit of the frontage on Cheney Road. So now this will have a nice defined parcel area around it. So we're going to have a 4.6 acre parcel here, and that's going to be basically done via 2 parcels. Parcel A, which we label on the plan, that's the land north, east, and southeast of lot 66, and that contains 3.72 of the acres. And then there's parcel B, and that's just a small segment at the roadway west of lot 66, and that contains 0.04 acres. So the total area to be conveyed from 65 to 66 is 3.76 acres, bringing it up to 4.6 acres. So the frontage on lot 66 will also increase because we're going to add that frontage that was to the south of it. So we'll now have 336 feet of total frontage with it. It'll be 4.6 acres, 336 feet of frontage. And then lots 65 will keep its remaining 790 feet of frontage. So that'll obviously meet and greatly exceed any lot size requirement. And then the lot size of lot 66 will go from 20 acres down to 16.2 acres plus or minus. So the reason for this, basically, as I said, one of the reasons is because we're looking to have that lot better defined. But Bob Griffin is focused on the management of the properties, and he wished to have a more clearly delineated parcel, as well as making the lot closer to conforming with zoning. So by adding that land area to it, the frontage, you exceed the zoning requirement for that house lot. Like I said, so it also, by adding that land area, also now have a fully surveyed property with meets and bounds that was lacking in the records. So it's kind of nice to have that. So just so that you know, Bob owns 2 other large tracts of land, R23, 64, and 63. That extends all the way to the Danville town line, probably around 100 or so acres. We have basically right now survey data that defines the entire frontage of both of those those 3 parcels, all the way to the rivers where it comes out. We're on the south side of Long Pond. So we have that surveyed. We've also surveyed up along the 2 abutting subdivisions around lot 66. And so we've got quite a bit done, but we did not survey the entire tract, that 20-acre tract. so we're gonna be looking for a waiver on that. Really no need for it. Like I said, we're still gonna have 16 acres of residual land left there, even though we took a little bit of land from it to add to lot 65. So, no known variances for the application, and then the only waiver that we have dealing with the actual application is for full survey and boundary of lot 66. No state approval is required as well.
Thank you. What?
So my comments are as follows. This is the first public hearing for a proposed lot line adjustment. The applicant is proposing to convey 3.78 acres from lot 65, a 20-acre parcel, to house lot 66, a 0.85 acre lot. Because this is the first public hearing, the board should consider invoking jurisdiction on the application. This is a lot line adjustment, so I would normally recommend invoking jurisdiction, but I would like additional information regarding one of the waivers being requested first. That will be addressed below. Two waivers are being sought. Two others, I should say, are being sought. The first is to waive mandatory preliminary review, and I have no issue with doing so. And the second is a request to waive the requirement of the full perimeter survey for both lots involved. The waiver request for this indicates on the first sheet of the plan that this is pending. I would like this explained more fully. In addition, the plan is not very clear with respect to where the final lot corners are established for existing lot 2366. This lot nearly triples in size, but the final lot property lines are not clearly identified. This should be made more obvious, and proper monumentation at the lot corners needs to be detailed. So my two concerns are that we end up with a lot, if the waiver is granted, where we don't really know the actual size. We do know that it far exceeds anything that our zoning ordinance requires. But I would expect that in the future, when they wanted to convey that property, they would do a full perimeter survey so that they knew exactly what land they were exchanging if that came up. But I think the board should discuss that. And as a result, there are some new lot corners that are established here, and they should be monumented with concrete bounds, not iron rods, unless in each instance what they're doing is using existing iron rods as final survey points. So that's the additional clarification I'd like to provide.
Okay. And this was not sent to Dennis for comment, I guess.
I did take a quick look at it, I didn't make any report or anything because I didn't need it. It's a good plan, it's a positive direction for doing this. The only thing I saw was on the easterly side, on sheet 2, the butter is 2254. I don't know if that's supposed to be 54-10. On sheet it talks about Austin Realty Trust, but underneath it said shared open space, so I don't know, maybe I just don't understand what that was. That's the only thing that I saw that was possible. Yes.
Is that the open space for Roller's Ridge? It's the little map.
225410. And on the second sheet it just says
54.
54.
Yeah, it should be 10.
It should be 10.
It should be 10. I can correct that and make that 10.
That I think Austin Realty Trust.
Correct.
Okay. That's the only thing I saw.
So it should be R 2254 10?
It should be 10 on the second sheet.
10 added to 54?
To the 54, correct.
Okay.
Yep, as it is on the cover sheet.
Oh, okay.
So just to talk about the monumentation for a minute, is you look at sheet 2, just to the left of the dwelling where we're creating the new lot line, we're holding the front corner. There's no monument there currently. The only So we're gonna set a stone bound at that point, and then we go back 120 feet and be setting another stone bound. Whereas the new line that we're creating that goes back to the Mockingbird subdivision, that common corner back there, there's an iron rod there now. And because we're gonna be over 400 feet, we're gonna set a pin, partially, well, not over 400 feet, but we're over 300 feet, we're gonna set a pin just outside of the wetland area down there. So we'll have another monument on that lot line. And then for the rest of it, it's mostly by high water mark out there, by swamp, things like that. So it was really difficult to survey some of this. Fortunately, we had existing subdivision plans that established some of these things, but there was quite a bit of surveying that we had to do to tie these all together. And then the area that he's picking up on that lot on the south side, there's pipes in the front and the back there, so there's already existing monuments there. So that one was pretty well defined.
So the two I have questions about, Charlie.
Sure.
You've answered one of them. That front corner is gonna be a stone bound.
Yep.
That's good.
Yeah,
So-
we'll set a stone bound there.
So the furthest eastern one that says iron rod to be set, there's a note that says barbed wire and tree, and then you say iron rod to be set.
No, that was an iron rod. Yeah, there's an iron pipe next to it that we found laying down. We'll set a new iron rod over there as well at that corner.
So that would, so what you're doing is using an existing boundary marker.
We're not gonna reset that pipe that's laying down. The thing's old, half rotted. So we're gonna set a new pin there.
My clarification is
That should be,
that there's an existing one
Yes.
that was there.
Yes.
So you're not creating a new.
No, we're not creating a new corner. We're
You're
just
not creating
resetting
a
that
new
corner.
monument, you're creating a new corner, but that corner is using an existing monument, which our ordinance allows.
Right.
So if that's the case, that one's fine. And
Okay.
the only one I would have had the question about, you said you're going to
Yes. Yep.
a new stone bound, so that should get reflected on the plan.
Okay.
So Charlie, I'm just a little confused about where the boundary lines are on this. So as I look at this, on the left-hand side of the lot, not talking south, northeast, south, I see the line going up, lot line to be eliminated, the other line moving a little bit to the left, and then going
Yeah.
forward to almost where there's a stone wall. Is that correct?
Yeah, so from the front corner, you
Yep.
can see that next to the existing structure.
Yep,
The lot line's gonna go in between that structure and the garage.
yep,
Okay, and then to a point, to an angle point, goes back 120 feet, and then from that angle point, we'll go all the way back to that stone wall.
okay. And then it comes down on an angle,
Excuse me?
and then it comes back.
Yes, then it's following existing property line that was established
Okay.
by that Mockingbird subdivision.
So when it reaches that point, where does it go from there?
So when
Because
it
that
hits that,
solid line has changed to something else?
so when it goes to that point at the wall,
Okay,
then it comes south, back
Right.
towards our property, 93 feet.
yep,
And then it follows what was a high water mark that established that property line over there.
oh, so it follows the high water mark line?
Yep.
Gotcha.
And
To
then
the-
from there, then it takes it traverses down to the river,
Okay,
southerly, then it follows a segment of the river,
okay.
and then out and around back over to Cheney Road.
That's really what I thought it did?
Yeah.
But I wanted to be really
Yeah,
clear?
it's,
Okay,
it's,
like I said, it took quite a bit of surveying. We had to go and survey not only the Mockingbird Lane plan, but all the other plans that were tied in to the west of that area.
okay. Just want to make sure I was really clear about it. Thank you.
And we had to locate the river, which was tough during the spring.
so basically, one uses, regardless of whether it's the center line of the river or the main water line, or the dash, dot, dash, whatever, it's the bold lines.
Yes.
And-
Yep.
that's
And we
how-
did do some survey ties, just so we could close the plan mathematically, where we had to follow the high water mark, as well as the river.
Thank you. So, we have And reports back from department heads, we have no comment from the Board of Selectmen, Code Enforcement and Building, Conservation, Fire, Health, Police, and Public Works. So there were no comments from the departments at this time.
Unanimous.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions from planning board members?
No, I realized what you did with the that garage sitting right on the existing property line.
Yep.
So by moving it over, it's only 10.5 feet, but you needed 20 feet on the other structure. So, it's making it more conforming, even if it's not yet conforming.
Yeah, it's not quite conforming, but it's better than it was.
But it's better
Yeah,
than it was,
the
yeah.
property line
Zero.
actually, I think, almost touched the garage there.
So, I have no problem with that, not being 20 feet from the property line, because it's better than 0.
Yeah, when we adjusted the lot line there, we felt it was better to maintain the 20 feet from
On the
the
other
more
side.
formidable structure, the one that actually has some use, other than just as a garage. The garage, I mean, if that ever falls apart, you can just move it over and conform. This other structure that's probably gonna be there for another 100 years.
No other questions from the planning board? Are we ready to open it for public comment? Okay, so we're ready to open the meeting to public comment. We do not have the microphone set up. Adam, can you do that for us, please? Do we have anyone, before we do that, do we have any public comment?
Okay.
We have no,
Oh, you could come up, you could use the table next to Charlie, he doesn't like.
well, we're trying to make sure everybody can hear. So, okay, so if you'd like to give public comment, what you need to do is first you need to introduce yourself and tell us where your residence is, and then you can give us your public comment. We need the other things for the record.
Okay. My name is Joanne Mahoney. We live on 12 Mockingbird Lane. And, the biggest property it's gonna impact, I guess. My husband wanted me to ask, are these the actual deeded lines? And will it affect my property, not only lot line, but, well, I guess part of my concern is what are they gonna do back here, because there is wetlands back there, and our house already flooded because somebody else wiped out a bunch of trees and everything like that, so it is concerning to me what's gonna happen to this property. And as far as noise level, I don't want it to become an RV recreational place. We already have walking trails behind our houses and things like that. I want to make sure that the property isn't being used for that, because one of the reasons we bought this property is because it's quiet. There's nothing around us, we're fully wooded, and I don't want it to change. I know I don't have that choice, but I don't want it to change. So I guess not only in person, I wish my husband were here. He can't be here tonight.
Can you speak a little bit closer into the microphone, please? Thank you.
So I don't fully understand it, and I couldn't hear a lot of what was being said because just the echoing in the room and the rattling of the papers, so I'm sorry if I'm not well-versed or asking more questions, but I just want to know, is this maintaining a residential and the property the way it stands?
Yes.
It's rural residential zone, so it's, if it was ever sold, it's accessible for other uses, but it's not commercial zone or anything else.
And I guess the other thing is they're not, we can only address the lot line adjustment.
Okay.
We can't, they're not before us trying to do some type of site plan development that we have any purview over.
Oh, okay.
And so that's kind of out of our wheelhouse. This isn't a project that we have any say in their use of the property as long as it conforms with the current zoning and regulations.
And so these are the deeded property lines?
That's correct.
What he wanted me to.
Yeah, that's from your record plan, from which your deed is drafted.
Okay. And it won't affect any. So it's going to go from here all the way up to here, from here to here,
So basically look like this.
all the way up to ours,
So this would be the lot now.
and that.
Yep. Yeah, this is not proposing any expansion of the existing home or anything, it's just simply a lot line adjustment.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And we do apologize for the acoustics, the town is working on that. It's just not succeeding. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we will close public comment.
Motion to invoke jurisdiction.
Second.
Any further discussion on invoking jurisdiction? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Okay, so we have 3 waiver requests. Are we ready to address the waiver requests? The first one was for the preliminary review. Any discussion on that?
I'll make a motion to grant the waiver request for preliminary review under Article 905.4A, mandatory preliminary review. It reads as follows: please accept this letter as a formal request to waive the subdivision review regulation, Article 905.4, requiring mandatory preliminary review. This is an application for a minor lot line adjustment. The proposal is to convey 2 parcels of land totaling 3.7 acres from a 20-acre parcel to a 2 and 0.85 acre parcel. The resulting lot line adjustment leaves both parcels with land area and frontage that meets and exceeds the zoning requirements. This proposal is intended to comply with all applicable zoning and subdivision regulations except where waived. And my reasonings would be the information contained in the waiver request.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
And that is unanimous. Okay. Before we address the waiver request for the engineering review cost, let's talk about requiring a full survey boundary of both parcels. Do we have any discussion on that?
I feel comfortable on what the applicant has stated as being, after some clarification of some that are being replaced. And obviously, I think the biggest issue is the ones that are now gonna bisect the property, where it seems like there's gonna be that stone monumentation, another stone monumentation, and then another pipe connecting up to that other. I think those are the important ones, and it looks like they're gonna be replacing that other iron pipe that is in disrepair or inserviceable. So, based on how much more conforming it's going to make that smaller lot, I feel comfortable not requiring a full site survey for the perimeter.
Any other discussion? Do the comments satisfy your concerns, Glenn?
Yes.
Okay. There's no further discussion. I think we're ready for the vote.
So, I guess we have a motion to yet.
Oh,
So that waiver, this is the waiver request for the 905.14 C13, requiring full survey. So I'll just read it and then I'll give my reasoning. The waiver request is requesting a waiver of Article 905.14 C.13. Dear members of the board, please accept this letter as a formal request to waive subdivision review regulation Article 905.14 C.13, requiring full survey boundary of both parcels as noted in the letter of intent. This is a proposal to convey 3.76 acres from lot 65, a 20-acre parcel, to lot 66, a 0.83 acre parcel. The resulting lot line adjustment leaves both lots with land area and frontage that meets the existing zoning requirements. The waiver is intended for lot 65 only. Lot 66 is shown with fully surveyed boundary. In addition, the remaining 16.2 acres of lot 65 are abutted by Mr. Griffin's 2 other holdings that contain additional acreage and frontage that support the request. There is enough remaining land area and frontage to ensure that lot 65 fully complies with the zoning ordinance and that a full survey is unwarranted at this time. Thank you for the consideration. I will make a motion to grant that request as written based off of the comments and satisfying the questions proposed by the town planner about the monuments that will be set and repaired.
Second.
any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Okay, so now that those are done, let's take a look at the engineering.
We had a third waiver request. We didn't take up the
Yeah.
engineering bond.
Yeah, I was
Yes,
gonna do
yes,
that.
Okay.
That's okay, thank you. So we do have a third request, formal request to waive subdivision review regulation, Article 905.14A2D, and boundary lot line adjustment fee schedule. Schedule A, requiring the establishment of a $5,000 engineering review account and to accept a $1,000 engineering review account instead. This is an application for minor lot line adjustment, and as such, any engineering review, even if necessary, would be minimal. I wanted that last because I wanted to make sure we had satisfied everything else.
I'll make a
first.
motion to grant the waiver request as written, based on the fact that it seems that most of the engineering review is probably going to be completed already, and it seems very minimal with this lot line adjustment.
I'll second that one too. Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that again is unanimous. All right, so the last item would be have a motion to accept the plan and to grant the lot line adjustment.
Anyone want to go for it, or you want me to go?
Go ahead.
You're on a roll, Chris.
Chris, you speak clearly, so defer.
I will make a motion that we grant the lot line adjustment application as presented, including the 3 waivers that were granted this evening, transferring the acreage from lot 66 to lot 65, or correction, from lot 65 to lot 66, which is essentially creating ensuring one of the lots is much more conforming with the zone.
Did you want to include not the granite boundaries that we set?
Yes, so the discussed boundaries, will just need to be ensured that they're in place, that we discussed and that were offered up by the applicant.
And Chris, could I just also ask you to include as a condition that they're gonna change the reference on the second page of lot 54 to the 54-10?
And Austin Realty Trust, was shared.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. Thank you very much, Mr. Zilch.
Thank you very much, appreciate it. Have a good day.
Have a good evening. We will open the second hearing of the evening, Unitil Energy Systems. The owner of 24 Toll Road Realty Trust at 24 Toll Road, map R12, lot 26. The applicant has submitted a site plan application for a site plan design review for the proposed solar field with associated access and stormwater management improvements. Welcome. If you'd please introduce yourselves and give us an overview of your application.
We'd be happy to. I'll introduce myself first. My name is Nick Nolan, a licensed engineer and principal at the firm TF Moran, joined by Mr. Jake Dustling, who is a senior engineer with Unitil and will be our Unitil representative for the course of the evening and future meetings, so that we have an opportunity to learn a little bit more about what Unitil is proposing relative to this proposed solar field. So I'll get us cited, and I'm going to hand it over to Jake to talk a little bit about what this project is, and hopefully why we're all excited about it. So this is going to be
Adam,
can you turn their mic up just a little bit? I don't know if it's feeding, can you turn their mic up just a little bit? I don't know if the people in the back can hear as they're speaking. And he's talking pretty close proximity.
I'll do my best to project. All right, so relative to the location of the proposed solar field, this is tax map R12, lot 26, comprised of just under 33 acres, carrying the address of 24 Toll Road and being zoned rural residential. So just relative to what immediately surrounds us, this is very much a utility infrastructure hub in a way, in that we have the Peaslee Eversource transmission switching station really immediately to our southeast. Further to the southeast, and this is better shown on the aerial mapping that we have provided you as part of our packet, is the Unitil Kingston distribution substation, and then also immediately adjacent to it, the Eversource Kingston distribution substation. Now, relative to why these substations are located as they are, we have several electrical lines that are running in the immediate vicinity. There's a 345 kV line traveling from the east. We then have a 115 kV line that's traveling out of the Eversource Peaslee substation. And then there's also the 34.5 kV line that then leaves the distribution substation for both Eversource as well as Unitil. So one good comparison to kind of compare our electrical lines to our roadways, the 345 kV line is that super highway, then it cuts down to more of your local or smaller interstates with the 115 line, and then the 34.5 kV line is really the lines we see out on our local byways. So just to get an order of magnitude as far as what these different lines mean. So that gives us a general sighting of where we are. You can see the grayed areas immediately to the east of the plan that we provided. So that's that existing corridor. It also provides a rather nice line of demarcation between us and our closest residential abutter. But I'll speak to those elements a little bit later. Jake, do you mind just giving us a little overview as to the project? You guys have also partnered with Revision Energy, so maybe we can talk a little about those folks too.
Great. Yeah. So before you do that, just for the board's remembrance and memory, this is a design review, so this is a non-binding discussion between the planning board and the applicant, to which abutters were notified. But you can ask any questions, they can ask us any questions. It's just so that everybody understands what the proposal would be going forward.
And to jump on that point before Jake jumps into it, so we're doing this very purposefully. We had the opportunity to sit down with Glenn and discuss what the project was, what it would entail. There was a few gray areas. So instead of trying to design it a certain way that we thought was best, we thought we would come before you, bring up those various items, get your feedback, and then modify the plans and resubmit them so we can go through that formal approval process. We're also hoping to connect with some of our abutters. You may have the opportunity to do. So we can hear a little bit about anything that may concern them or just general questions they have as to this type of facility. So that's the reason for the design review on that.
And I also understand that this was, from reading the newspaper last weekend, that this was approved by the PUC.
Yes, it was. It was ruled in the public interest by the PUC. Once completed, it'll have another hearing associated with it, but yeah, our first stage with the PUC was to get that public interest hearing out of the way. We didn't really want to go through all this effort if they weren't in support of the project.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So, like Nick said, we're proposing a 4.8 megawatt AC solar facility on this property. It's 6.5 megawatts DC. That's approximately 11,000 solar panels. They'll be supported by single-axis racking systems that'll be screw anchored into the ground, so there's very little concrete anchoring or foundationing associated with them. It'll include 39 small inverters located throughout the field. And all the energy produced by the field, as well as all the renewable energy credits, essentially offset Unitil's requirement to purchase off the regional transmission network that gets passed directly on to all of our customers in New Hampshire. As Nick said, we've partnered with Revision Energy for the facility. We went through a pretty rigorous competitive bid process there. They were able to come up with the best proposal that we felt met all our needs as well as our customers' needs. Yeah, so that's where we're at right now, and you know, we're excited for the project. When complete, we think it might be the largest one in New Hampshire, at least for a short period of time. And to give a little bit of other background, this is being built under RSA 374G, which allows utilities such as us to own up to 6% of our total load in renewable generation, essentially to offset those losses, which is what we're doing here by offsetting what we're bringing in from the transmission network and passing that along to our customers.
All right, so that's the high end of why are we doing this? I thought it'd make sense just to ask if there's just general questions. Yeah, how as to, what is this facility, how it works, and some of the background information Jake was able to provide, noting you kind of gave us a great opening volley. Yes, the PUC has determined this is in the best interest of our ratepayers.
Okay.
Are there any particular questions as to that? Talk a little bit about the site itself.
Let's talk about the site.
All right, as a planning board, you already did the site plan approval, so that makes a lot of sense. So relative to the layout of the facility, we'll put this back up. There are a couple things we always talk about at planning board, right? Concerns with just general impacts, whether it's environmental or otherwise. Sensitive receptors, which are typically our butters or otherwise the environment. What are we doing for purposes of screening, so landscaping? Traffic is usually a question we want to talk about, and then acoustics. Is this generating sound? Is this going to be somehow a nuisance? So I think I'll start first with the one that probably has the most far-reaching permit implications, which is the environmental aspect. There will be wetland impacts that are associated with this project. The reality is, for a facility of this size to be built, it's very difficult to find a parcel that is completely devoid of wetlands that also provides the appropriate characteristics for the interconnection to the utility system. So a little bit of background being, to settle on this site, TF Moran evaluated over 450 properties for Unitil across both their seacoast and capital regions. We used a various weighting system to try and evaluate these sites to determine which would be the best. We whittled that down to a list ultimately of, I think, 4 or 5 properties, and then started to work to pursue whether or not we could obtain those properties. That is a tough order, because it's almost the equivalent of knocking on doors to say, hey, is this property for sale? So a part of that criteria was obviously whether or not that property was currently for sale. Certainly makes the real estate transaction a lot smoother if that property is already listed. So we have, are you guys hearing me okay? I realize we're getting a little bit of bounce back from the mic.
I was turning it down.
Okay. You guys stop me, otherwise I'll just keep going. So we've settled on this property, and it's purposeful from the intent of, we mentioned those other utility infrastructure items that are immediately adjacent. That's a big component with tying into the electrical grid and making sure it has the redundancy and just the appropriate electrical infrastructure to tie in a facility of this nature. A lot of projects never get to that stage. It was nice to be able to start with the knowledge that we know that could happen here at this property. So relative to the layout of the facility, you can see those rectangular sections. Those represent our solar panels. The size and orientation of them are very specific to make sure that we can generate the most amount of power. We've held buffers 20 feet on the side yards, 30 feet along the front, consistent with what the residential rural requires for a building setback. Thought it made good sense to go ahead and hold that for our use of our panels as well. You can see along the northerly section of the site is where we're interconnecting to Toll Road. No wetland impacts in and across that area to tie into the existing paved surface that begins just east of that easement. But within the body of the solar field, you can see there's several dark areas. Those are areas that are either more remote or thinner or have lesser wetland characteristics than the areas that surround it, and have been deemed appropriate to be impacted relative to support this type of project. So we go out, we do a functional assessment to evaluate those wetlands, we do vernal pool evaluations, we do a wildlife habitat assessment. So these are all the hoops we jump through as part of the state approval process. All of those reports are currently basically a draft format, so that we can then submit to the state and go through what would be a pre-application process, where they'll vet out whether or not these impacts are appropriate to justify the construction of this facility. So the state's going to have a big part of this. The federal government, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, will also have their opportunity, as will the EPA. We're forecasting that area of impact at approximately 20,000 square feet, so about half an acre, a little bit less. We are still researching ways that we can lessen that impact. It is our responsibility as part of this development and the permit applications that we will file is to show that this is the least impactful layout relative to wetlands and the functions of those wetlands. So we're continuing to strive to find other ways to try and reduce those impacts, but right now those dark areas are the areas in which we would actually have a wetlands fill. Within the perimeter of the fence line that's proposed around the entirety of the site, we would be clearing trees as well. So you're going to have a little bit of a change in the characteristics of that land cover, but there would be no physical impact to those wetlands. So you would still have various species that can live and utilize those areas. It's just the reality is there are not going to be trees there any longer. So you'd have more of a scrub brush or understory that would be within those areas. Our expectation is to meet with all of those agency heads in the very near future so we can make sure that we're on the right track. Due to the area of impact exceeding 5,000 square feet, there will be a requirement for mitigation of those impacts. That can come in many different ways. Wetlands creation, upland buffer preservation, and then the fallback, which is their in-lieu fee program, where essentially you're writing the state a check and then they find the best way to use it for the purposes of conservation. So one element I wanted to make sure we discussed with you this evening, and ultimately the Conservation Commission, is whether or not there are any conservation projects shovel-ready, for lack of a better term, or something where there's been a real estate transaction where you guys have money set aside, maybe you don't have enough. We can come up with a calculated value to potentially assist towards those projects. So I want to make sure I made that clear, that there was an opportunity there for conservation. Life is balanced, so in order to allow a development, we need to find ways to offset any impacts that we would have to wildlife and those wetland characteristics. So that's our ball of wax relative to the environmental aspects. To go a little bit further from that, I started to mention our access considerations from Toll Road. At the end of Toll Road, you go from a fairly well-maintained paved surface, which then converts to more of a gravel surface across the easement. And then from there, we get to a bit of a woods road, which is something you can see more of being used for just the purposes of tree clearing. Yeah, you get a skidder down it for the purposes of cutting trees, but it needs to see some improvement. Our expectation is we would improve the road to a 20-foot wide gravel road, suitable for the vehicles that would carry our panels, but more importantly, fire apparatus, should it ever be required. The turning radiuses would all be evaluated to make sure that those vehicles can make those necessary turns. And I'll point out one specific element of the plan. This dashed area that comes off of the road and down, you can see this large turning radius. So this would be the area of potential equipment paths. We're providing a wider berth there for the purpose of, because essentially you'd have a flatbed tractor trailer truck that has to deliver these panels. There would be some equipment. Okay, so I'll narrate.
Yeah, let's do the stand mic. Yep.
Would you like me to narrate into the mic that portion?
What I want you to do is take the mic from the stand and, yeah.
Sure.
So the people at home that are watching on YouTube, because there's no sound at all on cable right now. Yeah, we could move the
stand over there, right?
the easel.
Oh, we've gotten this far.
Okay.
Sorry. In case we have a butter that wants to talk, maybe we can do that up. All right. So what I was narrating is really the turning movements that would be required for a fire apparatus or an oversized vehicle that would be delivering components of this or needing to access site for the purpose of maintenance. So this is the end of the Class 5 highway, Toll Road. It then goes to more of a gravel surface that I would assume Eversource is probably historically used for access to their easement. Then we go to more of a woods road that's in the neighborhood of 8 to 12 feet. And then it kind of gets lost off in the wilderness as we progress. I know I haven't walked this area further than maybe 1,000 feet beyond the property line, but there is still a maintainable, able to walk, right? You know, ATV, snowmobile, but I'd say pickup truck at most for the access that's available now. What we would do is improve that road to a 20-foot gravel access drive. That would then carry in and through the site where it shrinks down to 16 feet. And really right here is the area that I was indicating. You can see how oversized those radiuses are. It really provides the opportunity for a vehicle, whether it's a fire truck or otherwise, to pull in, back up, and then head along its merry way. This location makes a lot of sense for us because, again, it's the location of the equipment panels.
Does this sit on the aquifer?
I apologize, say it.
And wetlands.
Does this sits on the aquifer?
There is an overlap, which I believe is just off-site.
Okay.
So our northerly abutter, I believe, is more or less where that aquifer line falls. We do recognize that a conditional use permit would be required for the wetland buffer impacts that are associated with the project, though. So we've got a chance to talk a little bit about the wildlife and environmental site access. So from site access, let's talk a little bit about traffic. What can we expect? During construction, we will have construction traffic. During the earthwork phase, it'd be vehicles required to cut trees, vehicles required to grade the property. Now, one of the benefits of this site is, from a topographical standpoint, it's not too steep. 20% is your kind of cutoff for installing your PV panels. Anything steeper than that creates issues. The vast majority of the slopes we have on this site are between 8 and 15%, which is also advantageous when we look at our alteration of terrain permit process, because they carry basically a weighted system of how you manage your stormwater based off the existing slopes. So that when stormwater hits those panels, it basically has the opportunity for Mother Nature to do its job and really infiltrate into the soils. If it's too steep, stormwater can channelize, create erosion, or an immediate discharge. So that's part of that classification system and part of what went into selecting this facility. So we talked about access, we talked about a little bit about our panels. So relative to these panels, what do they look like? So you should have in your submittal a typical cut sheet. The height of that panel is anywhere between 10 or 12 feet at its furthest tip. So knowing that, and knowing that we are looking to essentially clear the property of trees, because PV panels work great when the sun can get to them. If we have large trees surrounding them, which would be the case here, where there's a fairly mature pine forest, it really would have a detrimental effect on the power generation capabilities. So knowing that, and you'll notice that we haven't added any landscaping to this plan, we really wanted to seek your counsel on that. When we look at our receptors as far as abutters, 500 feet plus or minus is the closest, which is also important when we talk about acoustics. There is some element of acoustical value to these, whether it's a hum or otherwise, because the inverters, it's essentially the noise of a fan. So the equivalent of, at 30 feet away, the level of conversation we're having here, but without the microphone. It's a fairly low volume. Once you get to a distance of approximately 500 feet, regardless of the site characteristics, that being elevation change or trees or otherwise, it's inaudible. So relative to this facility, one of the other decision-making components that we had here was looking at, okay, well, what are our nearest receptors? What are concerns that may be raised by abutters or otherwise? And from an acoustical standpoint, knowing that we don't have an abutter within 500 feet and that an abutter's home within 500 feet, that wouldn't have a negative consequence or wouldn't require further evaluation relative to the facility. Now, that would be assuming we put an inverter right on the property line, which we're not. Those are intermingled between the panels. So we'd have the expectation as we develop this plan further, we can maybe even show where some of those locations may be. So that way we have a better understanding of if there's any element of sound generation, albeit very minimal, where is it, and what distance from anyone who may find of an issue, where would they be located? When we look at the plan and the locations of where landscaping could go or why should it go there, we do have a very large cleared area immediately to our east. There is a portion of a parcel that really falls between that. It does provide a fairly good buffer. We do have Toll Road directly to our north. There is another residential property to our southeast. Use the mic. So there is another property really running further along this section, you can see one of the homes that's located here. You know, you've got trees, you've got a corridor of power lines, and then you've got some more trees that's currently constituted. Even if this area did not have trees, I feel like the character of the neighbor's already established, we'll say, by those utility lines. So whether or not there is a value or a need providing landscape screening, or whether it be the northerly portion, the northeast being the budding to this property, the northwest, which is really Toll Road, typically you would look at buffering the road providing access. And then really along the westerly portion, this is all wetlands, so that becomes a little bit problematic as far as providing screening. We acknowledge that although the mature trees would be cut, the underbrush would be allowed to grow back up within that area. And then as we work our way along that southerly portion and then back up, Unitil also has under agreement with this property to the south. Final plans don't exist, but it made financial sense for them as part of a real estate transaction that if they were to acquire this land, they would also look to acquire the other available land that's immediately adjacent to it.
Can you repeat that?
Sure.
I'm just having trouble hearing.
It made sense to them that if there were two parcels that were available and they were directly located next to each other and also located next to all their other utility infrastructure, well, shoot, let's buy them both, for lack of a better way of putting it. So that gives them other opportunities should they wish to pursue those in the future. So if we own this is a corridor, we really wanted your feedback. What are we looking to screen? Right? There is mature vegetation beyond our property line, but we also want to be good neighbors and be good stewards. So is there a desire for some element of planting in certain locations that this board may think would be approved? And again, it's a design review, so you're not being held to your word tonight, but it would be good to at least have some initial feedback so we can evaluate our plan and see if there are some accommodations we should be making.
So as I look at the plan, it appears that the westernmost portion of this property is almost at the Danville town line.
I believe we have some distance before we get to Danville. I'll double check my map.
Yeah, if you would please, it's hard to tell where the Danville town line is, particularly on the colored map.
We had looked at the tax maps. I apologize, I don't have one with me.
We do.
There's actually one in the packet on the table on the last page.
If you're coming in Fry Road, that's all in Kingston.
Right.
You get right to the very end.
Correct.
Actually, here's Johnson Road.
Johnson Road is in Danville, yeah.
Yeah, so
It's a distance.
it's fairly close.
Because we need to know that for regional impact, that's why I'm asking.
Is a concern. That was one of the things we looked at too, and we may have actually talked about this too, Glenn. You've got the certain criteria that say, okay, when is it considered a development of regional impact? You know, impacts to school systems, transit systems. A lot of the items really don't apply to this type of use. We're not generating a large mass of traffic that would have undue influences on roadway infrastructure. Proximity can be a concern depending.
Hold on till the phone stops, please. Again, the acoustics are horrible, so when something like that happens, it makes it difficult.
When we looked at the criteria for development of regional impact, it doesn't appear as if it applies given this use. If we were proposing a 500-unit residential subdivision or something that was going to generate more traffic or otherwise influence the surrounding towns, that's really when we more see development of regional impact be applied. So that was our expectation, but obviously if the board felt otherwise, we'd want to hear that tonight.
So for the members of the audience, just so that you know, we're talking about regional impact, and that's asking whether or not this project is going to have an impact on an adjacent community. If we do deem that it is, we need to notify that community of that fact, and that gives them the same status as an abutter. Just so that you're aware. Okay.
There's other things other than just the impact on schools, you know, like
I think there's 8 criteria.
What I'm saying is that if, for example, this was a commercial development that generated another kind of power plant that generated noise, that would be
light,
or
sound.
if you had things that were going down into the aquifer, that we shared with Danville. Those would be considered factors. And it doesn't appear, other than just the impact of local impact on wetlands and requirement to recharge whether we fill, so that there's no net loss of recharge.
Our expectation would be meeting all the alteration of terrain requirements, so we'd have no increases in peak rate of runoff or volumes, so, correct.
Right, so, I did have one quick question about, you referred to these in some things, a single axis rotation, so that all the panels rotate on the part together.
They rotate east to west. So they track the sun as it rises and sets. So the main reason for that is it gives us more output because it follows that sun throughout the day.
Oh yeah, I get the reason, but I didn't know. So they're all, the alignment of those is such that they can all rotate around the nose.
Correct. They rotate around a single rod, essentially.
And those are basically silent type of 12-volt motors, right?
Small 12-volt DC motors, yes.
Chair, a question for you, and the board in general. Is development of regional impact something that you wish to discuss to go through those criteria, so we have that clear prior to future meeting?
Yeah, we will talk about that tonight for sure.
Okay.
I did notice as we look at our town tax map, which is not at all necessarily accurate, but it does show that it looks like the aquifer is on maybe more than 25 but less than 30%.
I saw that as well, so
Of
it
the
sounds like I
property,
have some
so
follow-up.
we do want to make certain that there's going to be no impact to the, or little impact to the aquifer. So that'll be one thing you'll need to address. Obviously, the impact to the abutters. You might want to take a look, I just looked in my book and it's not there. Kingston does have a noise ordinance, so you're going to want to make sure that it meets the noise ordinance.
Did you want to do department?
Yeah, we'll do department.
Because a lot of that was addressed by conservation.
So we do have comments from our departments. Here we go. Board of Selectmen, toll road should be upgraded to at least.
To the entrance.
Thank you.
Yeah, to the entrance of their site.
Of their site,
The
yeah.
Board of Selectmen would wish that the road be put to town standards until they at least enter the access point of the site.
Is the rest of the road to town standards? I don't think so. But anyway, they'll certainly want you to upgrade the road, as you mentioned that you probably would. Code enforcement and building said if this is built, where does the power go? Okay, we've explained that. Kingston Conservation said, while the proposed solar array design avoids the majority of wetland area on the property, there are 3 wetland areas indicated on the plan which will be impacted. The Conservation Commission would like to view the areas and to know whether there is any way these wetlands can be left undisturbed. If not, is this a project that would require mitigation? Fire says year-round access to the site and a Knox box for any gates. Director of Public Works. The current configuration of Toll Road offers limited sight distance on Mill Road, which is a narrow and dangerous road. The intersection will need to be inverted to a T-design approximately 75 feet south of the current location. The town owns this land, and this has been mentioned to the applicant. Also, numbers and weights of construction and delivery equipment will be needed to assess the impact on the Class 5 portion of Toll Road. Applicant will be responsible for a pavement overlay for any degradation to current state conditions. And that is for the department heads. So pretty much most of the things that you've talked about this evening.
And we did reach out to Mr. Coons to talk about what the expectations were. What we typically do is we could go out and do a pre-construction video survey of the road, what condition it is in, document it, put it away. Once we're done, what does it look like? You know, have we created damage? If so, we understand that we'd be responsible for repairing that. The request to reconfigure the town road is a bit of a taller order. We do have a meeting, Mr. Coombs, on Friday, so we can walk the site, understand better his concerns. I'd have to say that reconfiguration of the town road was not in the budget for the project. I know this is a large project. We all kind of make that assumption that, okay, it's very deep pockets, gives us the opportunity to do a lot of other things. Roadway infrastructure is very, very expensive. It's one of the reasons why when we looked at the site, we saw that there was ready access to it with some minimal improvements to Toll Road as far as the portions that are not paved currently. So we understand that'll be a dialogue with DPW to try and come up with the best solution. We understand that you guys are obviously the ruling authority in the end, but we hope that we can find compromise on what's being requested.
Okay. So we also have comments from our town planner and our town engineer. Why don't we start with the engineer, please? You've had some comment, a lot of things here that were not addressed this evening so far.
Yeah, I looked at this as, like I normally look at any plan that is submitted to me as a site plan review, and I probably looked at it a little bit more detailed than I should have, and didn't realize that it was a design review. I didn't know where to start or stop, so I just...
If you're reviewing this as an expectation as a full site plan, then I would imagine you were woefully underwhelmed.
And perhaps, you know, some of these items, you know, would be helpful to you. Most of them you probably already know. So I offer the following comments. Permit must be obtained from the Wetlands Bureau for the wetland filling. Number 2, these are Article 504, 5G7. This is G7. Plan should be stamped and signed by a wetland soil scientist and surveyor. G8, final grading plan with proposed contours must be shown for the site and toll road. G16 shows snow storage areas. G21 show existing and proposed impervious areas and percentage of the lot coverage. G22 and Article 908 drainage analysis and stormwater management must be provided. G28 will a well and sanitary facility be provided for personnel that work at the site. G33 signs should be provided, no trespassing, private property, etc., something like that. G36 survey details should be provided for the extension of the toll road. I know it's got, looks like some stone walls there, but I think that it would be prudent to have that extension of toll road identified by varying distances. Number 10, provide construction details, construction sequence, long-term maintenance plan. G37, highway easement granted to the town of Kingston for future road improvements. We've done that to other site plans where they might want to have widen the road in the future, depending on other development long term. So
can I pause you there? Like
discuss that with the town road agent. Okay. Town road improvements must follow the typical road cross section, and I know you should show it as gravel for a toll road, and that probably would be acceptable, but I know that the fire department NFPA requirements of a 20 feet of solid pavement to run their vehicles on. So I think you need to do at least 20 feet gravel, and gravel probably should be according to the town requirements, their cross section. Whether you pave it or not, that's certainly something that you could always ask for a waiver from that, I suppose, if that's the procedure. Bonding for a performance guarantee must be set prior to any approvals. Profile plan must be provided for the roadway and on-site access. I would recommend the 20-foot gravel access be extended into the site to the turnaround for emergency vehicles. Again, I think that that's an FDA requirement to get emergency vehicles in and around and get them to turn around on the site. Show utility access plan. I thought of that because, I mean, obviously you generated power there, so I don't know if it's underground that goes, or is it going to be telephone poles it's going to go through? So something to look at. Perimeter chain link fence is shown. Gate should be shown with detail. Applicant should consider modifications to portions of the fence for wildlife passage. So those are the comments I had up to this point. Again, probably a little bit more than we need at this point in time, but maybe that's helpful for you, which is below.
No, I think it is, because there's a couple items, if I can, just to touch on briefly. Relative to the highway easements granted to the town, I'm assuming that would be in relationship to toll road. Is that is that discussion more so with the road agent as to expectations, or is that something that the board on a case-by-case basis has looked at to determine if it's a need for the town?
For widening the road, you think?
It's generally either for widening or maintenance, to make sure that there's
Ditch lines.
clear sight distance and whatnot, so, but it is a discussion with the road agent.
Okay.
And that process always takes place during the site plan review process, so it would be something that, if I don't see something in writing from either you or the road agent, it becomes part of one of my comments.
Okay.
To see where that stands.
Okay, the next item, which was 12, which had to do with the roadway improvement plan. I know you made mention of pavement, so we've been through this with a fair amount of fire marshals and fire chiefs. As long as it's 20 feet wide, that meets NFPA requirements. A lot of municipalities push for pavement, but when push comes to shove, relative to the state fire marshal, gravel has been determined an acceptable surface. So it's really more of a question of, well, what's the typical roadway section say, and do we have to ask for a waiver for pavement? Is that a fair?
I would think that would be appropriate, is to ask for a waiver if that's what they're looking to do.
The degree to which the road is going to be improved is really a discussion that you have to have with the board of selectmen.
Okay, so we did meet
Because
with
I have heard comments, I think I heard Chris say, that it has to be built to town standard, and that's wildly different than what exists out there now.
Yes, I guess that was a generic term, but, and I think when they were looking at it, they're thinking, well, if a subdivision was going in here, they would expect that road to be brought to town standard. And now what if somebody goes out and builds a subdivision in that other parcel that's just past you, are they now required for bringing everything
Well, that's not
to town?
class 5. So toll road is only class 5 up to the power lines, and then it's a
class 6.
Class 6 up
Class
to
six.
gates and bars.
And so it would not be eligible for subdivision in terms of.
Well, it wouldn't be eligible for subdivision unless the town agreed to lay it out and the developer agreed to pay for it, because they would be able to get frontage on a newly established town road, but only if the town bought into the premise.
So one of the nice things that we actually have the opportunity to do is that we're going to build, if we were to build it to a 20-foot gravel road standard, we've created basically the stepping stone for someone to improve it further should they look to, if they wanted to do a subdivision, if you guys even approved a subdivision. So it seems like it's a step in the right direction, that we're improving that infrastructure, and it would provide a greater opportunity for somebody else in the future, really a stepping stone to that purpose.
That's why the waiver should include not only the pavement, but also the width of gravel. Just look at the details, cross-section details.
But I think having that discussion with the Public Works Director is a great step.
Glenn made a point about meeting with the Board of Selectmen, which we did, and they actually directed us to you in regards to that question. So we're kind of caught in this weird catch-22 where everybody's kind of saying, well, ask the planning board, ask the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, well, I certainly would expect that the Board of Selectmen would like to hear what the planning board feels about toll road, but the laying out of roads and the improvement of roads is the responsibility of the Board of Selectmen, not the planning board. And we would have to, before we could consider anything, understand exactly the degree to which the Board of Selectmen was comfortable allowing the class 6 portion of toll road to be utilized. So
they did send us back to you to make that determination.
And I will say we rely heavily on the input from the Public Works Director, who's in charge of all the roads.
Understood.
I don't know roads.
Yeah, and there's
So what I'd like to
question.
pull out of this, if I may, is what's our procedure? What is our order of conduct here to see this out? One, meet with the road agent. So Friday, hopefully we have more clarity as to what the expectations are, although there's already been some back and forth. Is it a return trip to the Board of Selectmen with a recommendation in hand as to what that should be, to allow them to say, yes, this is acceptable to us under this premise, then it comes to the planning board, or are we reversing those roles? Because we want to plan for that in our schedule.
I don't see how we can reverse those roles. We have no ability to approve something on a class 6 road that's closed subject to gates.
I would identify with the Public Works Director on Friday when you driveway to the property that we use. It's a big difference.
I almost look at this
Huge
more,
difference.
It's a big difference.
it's more of a fire, it's more of a fire.
Well,
Right, and in the end, the approval has to be granted by the board of selectmen.
And there's no question that the entrance to this from Mill Road is a bit challenging.
Well,
Yeah, I did
especially,
drive it.
especially from 125, coming in 111, you get an angle to.
Yeah,
right,
it's
you
easier
can-
from 111, but from 125, it is a challenging turn.
So that allows us the opportunity to convey that to contractors or maintenance people to make sure that they're taking the more suitable route, but that's certainly something we'll.
I mean, it may be adjusting where it is now, it may be putting the new road in as suggested by the Public Works Director, it may be something in between.
Okay.
But certainly, it's a negotiation process.
And forgive me as I'm still a little fuzzy on what we need to do to solidify the ability to build on this property with the access. So understood, meeting with the road agent to receive a recommendation as to what the expectation is. We would then go to the Board of Selectmen in parallel with, or a different, because they meet, is it every other week?
Every week.
Well, every week, but you are gonna go by a summer schedule, I think.
We're gonna go to a summer schedule, it'll be every other week, but right now we're still currently every Monday.
So it doesn't sound like.
Conservation committee is gonna be a big step.
Yep.
That's gonna be a big one.
Yep, and establishing a site walk, we're imagining, is also something that's important. And to that extent, we have a forum right now where if the board has an interest in scheduling a site walk, I believe you have that opportunity because this was a publicly noticed meeting.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to skip steps, but I'd like to make forward progress. If we want to see the site, could
We
we?
generally do sidewalks on either Saturday or Sunday mornings early.
All right, well, the kids have me up pretty early, so I'll be okay on that one at least.
What are the, as far as the wetland, the aquifer protection? Do we have anything in our ordinances that dictate a solar field?
We do not.
That's
So I
right.
think what we'd be looking for is information as to whether or not this would have effect on the aquifer. Yeah, which obviously comes to runoff and stormwater runoff and that sort of thing.
So I'd probably look into homework on the aquifer.
Yep,
Because
we'll make sure we
that's
address
a
that as
huge
part of our
thing in the
submission.
town of Kingston.
Yeah, aquifer and wetlands are big.
Okay, so I think I've got clarity.
And the
there.
butters. Butters are also important.
So we'll meet with the road agent, we plan to go back to the Board of Selectmen with that recommendation, and ideally we'd be meeting with the Board of Selectmen before we came before you at another meeting, so that we could provide that expectation as well, so that way you'd have that information. Of the other items that were listed, one that jumped out at me was the bonding or performance guarantee must be set prior to any approval. Is there a general expectation, so Jake has the opportunity to review with his folks at Unitil, what we'd be looking for if there's gonna be a bonding element for this project?
Probably would have a lot to do with the road, whether it's a road or a driveway. That might be a big thing for the bonding. You're gonna go in and clear it, put solar panels up, so there's not a lot of.
And I think it's difficult with a project like this, because it's not say an excavation site where you're saying, we're gonna excavate this amount of dirt.
We wanna do as little earth
So
as
this is how
possible.
many trucks you need to get that much yardage out. When you're talking about bringing in and out tons of vehicles for the, erection of the solar panel systems and any of it, there's gonna be a calculation that comes to bear.
Okay.
Dennis is the most qualified to make.
That's certainly a topic for the road agent as well, because I think that's typically in the past, I've worked with the road agent, past road agents, to come up with bonding for the existing toll road or the existing road that's there, just to see what it would take for an overlay. We could probably throw up some numbers as well, as far as what it would take to fix it if something happened. So that's really what we were looking at in the past. We did smallpox.
Right, when we did smallpox, they actually took video of the entire road so you could see the existing condition, and then at the end of the time period,
We would do that, yeah.
we'd see if there were any issues, so that's
Same as
cool.
what you said.
No, this is great. I really appreciate this just open dialogue, because the last thing you want to do is get further into a project and then all of a sudden be hit with something that you weren't expecting. So you've been able to give us a couple of examples of how you've addressed things in the past, which just makes our jobs a lot easier, so thank you.
Glenn, you had comments?
Yes. Yes. They're in the packet, and so they are as follows. The property is accessed off a class 6 road. Wow, have we talked about that? The board of selectmen will have to allow this use of road flow subject to gates and bars, and the degree of road upgrade to be required will need to be determined in coordination with the board of selectmen and the highway department. Wetland impacts are indicated. Are any of the wetlands high value? The Conservation Commission should provide comment, which they have, about the wetlands proposed to be filled. I believe that our ordinance would require a variance for fill. I'll look at that again. It might be.
So we did sit down and talk about that one directly.
Maybe
at length.
It's a conditional use permit, isn't it?
It's a conditional use permit for the buffer and
so.
hooks. So we went back and looked at a couple examples, knowing that we had done Peasley, we had done the Unity Land Eversource substations. We went back and looked at those as a reference. The impacts for the buffers are done by a conditional use permit, but you have no ordinance relative to the wetland impact. That's governed by the state.
Correct. That is now how I remember it as well.
Thank you.
The other
We did
thing,
talk about it.
Because it was a big one. We wanted to make sure, if we needed to go to the ZBA, we needed to identify that early, because that adds a month to a schedule.
so if you're bringing in 11,000 solar panels,
11,000.
11,000. We were trying to calculate that. We weren't there. But if we're bringing in 11,000 solar panels, I think also the abutters, I mean, we're going to want to know how many truckloads is that going to be? How much are they going to be impacted just by the building, the erection of this? Should that happen? I mean, obviously that's like a one-time impact, but still, you know, we want to be
still wanna
very
be
sensitive.
Maybe it totally happens during
The
certain
abutters
times.
about anything, should it get approved? So certainly we're gonna want to have an idea of how many truckloads you're gonna have going through.
Or how many trucks per day?
Mm-hmm, yep,
If it winds up being, you know, you obviously would come all at once, but I mean, if you're bringing in 3 trucks a day or something like that, that's what the abutters might want.
Yeah, having a chance to talk with Jake about that one, because that, again, that was one of the bullet points we knew, like, all right, sound, wetlands, access, traffic, like, that's gonna be an element of this. And it's really very similar to their substation projects, except in those cases, a lot more earthwork. So you're gonna have your duration of the earthwork, tree cutting, where you'll have some larger machinery. But then after that, you're talking about, you know, half a dozen to a dozen people in pickup trucks that are doing assembly. And then, yeah, you would have flatbed tractor trailer loads that are getting delivered for the panels that would be more intermittent. We could certainly work to try and define a better schedule for that, or an expectation. So that's, we'll plan to provide some sort of traffic narrative that goes towards identifying.
a plan so the abutters can understand what's happening.
Does that toll road go from a class 5 to a class 6?
Yes.
Do you know on that map approximately where that is?
Yeah, it shows on.
Actually, made sure to put a note on there. So right here, the power. Yep, right before the power line is the end of class 5 road. The remainder is the class 6.
It's labeled on the plan.
So I guess what I'm getting at that is just to talk to that road agent. If where it goes to class 6 is subject to cars and gates, from that point on, it'll probably possibly be a driveway application versus a road application. There's a big difference.
Oh, yeah,
And you're gonna put gates up for the town of Kingston, it's a non-passable road. That's an active driveway to the project. It's just a possibility.
Yep, and we had looked at some of those elements, so we'll hash it out.
Does the planning board have any further
Oh,
questions?
can I just quickly go through my remaining ones?
Oh, I'm sorry.
The one that you showed.
Who's in there?
Hey, there's a B page.
Oh, I missed the B.
Yeah, there's page 2.
I'm sorry, I missed
So,
page 2.
It's okay, because we've talked about most of it. We have the cut sheets for what the arrays look like, and you've let me know that they are the type that track and that there is noise generated, and you've indicated that the sort of the degree of the noise generated, so that's very helpful. I asked, will there be perimeter screening of any kind, which we've touched on, and how far away is the nearest residential abutter, and you've told us that that is 500 feet. How are the arrays maintained? Is there someone on site every day, once a week, once a month, once a year? What is that maintenance activity? We have a very small array in Brentwood of solar panels, and I've never seen anybody ever doing anything there, but you used the number 11,000, which I don't remember from our preliminary discussion, because that's a really big number.
It is, but they're not as big as you'd think.
Yeah,
When you
they're
say
not-
11,000, they're probably a little less than this table.
So you don't have a maintenance person out there every day? Some sort of-
No, they're monitored remotely, 24/7. But then on an ongoing basis, it would typically be one person once a month. They'd go and inspect, make sure everything looks the way it's supposed to. And then there's a more rigorous yearly inspection where they go at open cabinets and so forth.
Cool. And just like any facility, there's certain maintenance, mow the lawn. Like what we try and use is certain types of grass seed, like wild mixes that provide some enhanced ecology to the area, but at the same time, slow growing, and try to be as maintenance free as possible, so that way it would never interfere with the panels themselves.
Yeah, I think we're anticipating, maybe twice a year for vegetation management, just cutting back the weeds and stuff like that.
All right, I can't believe I asked this question. I said, are solar arrays taxable structures? That's never an issue for the planning board, so.
That was just a
So
question.
just, that was just something I was wondering. I guess.
It was late, you just had some more ideas.
You don't need to
come out.
answer that one. Is any lighting necessary on the site?
No.
Because the reality is, when do solar panels work? Daylight.
Turn the light on,
So-
make the solar panels work.
Your lights come on, it's quite typical.
Is any signage necessary?
Our same typical signage that you would see on our substation fence, some warning signs and the site sign indicating the address and name and the contact info.
And how is snow removal handled in the wintertime around the arrays? Is it just something that, because of what we generally get for snowstorms, it doesn't really?
It doesn't really impact. We'd plow the access road into the site so we get vehicles in there, but as far as around the panels and so forth, they actually, when it snows, they rotate fully up, allow the snow to slide off, and then they continue on their way.
They do.
They do.
Are they warm? I know nothing about solar panels.
You can touch them, usually.
Can a snowflake touch them? I mean, does
Yeah, oh yeah,
snowflake just melt
snow
upon
will
contact?
pile up, but it's similar to like a metal roof. It's very slick, so it slides off very quickly. But yeah, they rotate almost fully vertical, 60 degrees vertical if the weather station senses so much snow to allow the snow to slide off. They do the same thing if you expect winds over a certain miles per hour. You don't want them tracking during those conditions. So.
Oh, they're smart.
Yeah,
This isn't the new wave of technology, so this isn't the solar panels we saw 10 years or 15 years ago. With tax credit advantages as well as a lot of other state mechanisms, the industry's been allowed to grow and provides the opportunity to provide one of these renewable resources. It's nice.
All right, thank you very much. That does finish my comments.
What gauge extension cord should the butters invest in?
Can we put a PV, like, charging station on the end?
So, does the board have any further questions?
No, Ben, as far as the Board of Selectmen, there are procedures for how they're gonna deal with that, right? So you should be able to find those somewhere.
I would hope that they have a procedure for construction on Class 6 roads. Most towns do.
I can assure you we'll have the Public Works Director look it up.
It's typically, as long as it's on approved plat by the planning board, the Board of Selectmen can then authorize it. So that's why I was wondering, from a staging of meetings, it almost sounds like we're gonna be road agent, select board, planning board, select board, or some combination.
Yeah, the intent is not ping pong, but the state law is clear about who gets to designate how roads are used, and it's not the planning board, it's the Board of Selectmen, so we need to keep them very much in this play.
Okay, so anyone in the audience wish to speak? Okay, now, just so you know, I understand the acoustics have been horrible. You may ask questions that have already been answered, and that's fine. We'll be very patient. Would you go to the microphone, please? You need to introduce yourself, and you need to tell us where you live.
Lisa Francoeur. I live on 84 Fry Road in Danville, so I have that little bit of property that's on the Kingston-Danville line at the corner of Toll and Fry. So one of the questions I had, is there going to be any blasting? That area is very granite rich.
No, there's no blasting that's proposed as our earthwork phase. And Jake, can you just explain again the foundation structure for this, how it works?
Yeah, so the way they work is they essentially just get drilled into the ground, similar to some sort of anchor or large screw. And if there is, it should screw right into that granite. There should be no blasting or anything that associated with construction.
And then another question I had more for the town is that once they put the road in on Toll Road, it's going to be very close to the town forest, the Fry Road Forest, so will more people tend to park there and walk in, because it might be a little bit closer. So just, you know, if people are gonna park, you may consider that you need a little bit more space there. And they park at the end of my driveway a lot to walk in there, so, you know, once it's like, oh, they've got a highway down, they might decide to park there.
Well, I think that depends on what the board of selectmen decide about what Peter was talking about, gates and bars. So.
Oh, I've been enjoying that because I think our parents a long time ago talked about a road that was subject to bar and chains for like 99 years or something, what to do with it.
We have other facilities that are behind bars and chains at other
Yeah.
towns, so.
What's the chance of fire?
Chance of fire. So I was actually talking about this one too before the meeting. You know, there aren't any real good studies related to PV facilities and concerns with fire. It's primarily has to do with rooftop units, and a lot of it has to do with the wiring, and because of its close interconnection with the membranes of roofs. You know, this is a solar field project, so this is out in the open. The majority of the electrical work is buried, like you would have in any other instance. So I would say extremely low, but without a real body of knowledge on that. We can see what we can find for other resources, but.
And I asked that mainly because when the projected supermarket, whatever, was gonna be off of 111 in Danville, there was talk of having to improve Fry Road out to Kingston so that emergency apparatus could get in that area. So I didn't know if maybe somebody would say, you know, Toll Road's not gonna be good enough to get in there, that they might have to improve that.
So for the purposes of the board, we've evaluated turning mobility for fire access is good. So to the question of what do we do if there's a fire, we work out those protocols with the fire department.
Because I know the Fry Road end, where it stops, the pavement stops, is you're not gonna get, I don't even think you're gonna get a ATV down there, or, you know, anything big. It's very rutted because of ATVs in the area. I think I would be concerned about, there's a lot of ATV use in that area, there's a lot of shooting in that area. So I would be very aware of my solar panels out there. And you said, and I first heard 100 feet from a dwelling, but then I think I heard 500 feet?
So if the question is in regard to acoustics and how far the sound travels, at a distance of 30 feet, the equivalent of the sound is turn these mics off, it's the equivalent of me talking to Glenn from 10 feet away. The way in which the sound dissipates is there's studies that show this. There's a really good study done in Massachusetts in 2012 that basically says at a distance of 500 feet, regardless of your site conditions, it could be a wide open field, that sound is inaudible. So you can't pick it up beyond the background noises that already exist.
And where was the closest dwelling on the map?
And so we're over 500 feet away.
I was just wondering where it was.
We're over 500 feet away.
Is it?
And that would be from our closest panel, which again, we don't know that we'd have an inverter on that has a fan. So that's the due diligence we'll do on our part, so that we can identify, well, what is that? It's a fan. Like this isn't a catastrophic noise element, but we want to make sure that we're being as clear and transparent as possible. So we'll try and make sure we can identify what that closest one would be, so that we have a good dimension to work from.
Yeah, I know from the maps, my husband had said that we'd be able to probably see the fence, but we have a lot of trees up in the area, so. And our house isn't on the Kingston, it's back on the Danville side, so. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. Seeing none, we will close public comment. And we're back to the board for board questions and comments. Do you have any more questions for us?
I think the one other thing I want to take out of this is, from a landscaping standpoint, is there an expectation given our setting? I didn't want to come in here with the conversation of, it's nothing required, look at where we are. I was hoping that we could kind of naturally evolve to that conversation But do you have an expectation for any areas of the site to be screened?
Well, it sounds like,
Lots of 60-foot big elm trees.
yeah.
But
It
the reality
sounds like
is,
you're going to have some wildflowers and.
but that is, you know, we're looking at from an ecological standpoint, you know, what elements can we do to enhance, and that wildflower mix, it's great for our pollinators, it's great for some of those other little critters.
It's great for wildlife. One of the things you want to make sure you address is whether or not you're going to use any herbicides.
Question.
I know that's something that the Conservation Commission will be concerned about, and
Yeah,
being over an aquifer.
At this time, we're not planning on it.
Yeah, but just,
Yeah.
that will definitely be something you want to answer. If you're not
them.
going to do it, you want to let them know that's not in
What
the
I'm
plan.
expecting our submittal to contain is a very inclusive narrative with a paragraph or two that hits on each one of these items that we've discussed, so that way you guys have it for your record. If a member of the audience is curious as to that component, we'll have copies available to them so they have that information as well. But yeah, again, the idea of a project like this, we want to be as transparent as possible is what we're proposing. There are limitations. Landscaping is one of them. We want to make sure that we're not shielding these units. So I have the expectation that our submittal that we're going to be updating, as of right now, would not include any additional landscaping. If it's something that the board feels is appropriate after hearing the presentation this evening, further evaluations of the plan, we'll address it at the next meeting.
Well, certainly it's a fairly remote spot considering others in our commercial zone. When a commercial property is abutting a residential property, you need a 50-foot buffer. And we expect that to be a vegetated buffer.
Yeah.
So.
We did see that in the regulations, and that's
Yeah.
why we wanted to make sure that it didn't appear as if it was applicable to this instance, but I didn't want to make too many assumptions.
It's not applicable to rural residential because we don't usually have any commercial things in rural residential. So you might just want to be sensitive to that.
Although this would be a commercial use.
Yes, that's what I mean, yeah.
So the 50-foot buffer would apply. So it's just something to consider.
So that's a good clarification. So when we sat down and talked about it with Glenn,
I don't.
that was
That's a commercial zone buffer, I
No, it's a
believe.
commercial use buffer, because we had that issue at 266, where the residential use next to the commercial use, the residential use, even though it was in a commercial, it had been later zoned commercial, the fact that the use was residential gives you a 50-foot buffer. So if you have residential use next to your.
I'm gonna reserve the right to look at that.
Yeah, that's good.
Please,
Because this is in the rural residential zone.
right.
It's, whereas 266 is in a commercial zone.
and as far as our
So
use.
the use, commercial use is allowed in the rural residential zone. And
Limited commercial use is allowed in commercial zone.
right, and you're not, I believe, we can look it up in the ordinance book because that's something that
I think one of the important criteria is what is the use? This is a public utility infrastructure.
Right.
Or appurtenance. So it doesn't actually fall under commercial, it's kind of in no man's land, which is why we assume that any requirements for landscaping would really be as directed by the board, that the 50-foot requirement isn't required in this district, given the way in which your ordinance is written and the use that's proposed. But it doesn't mean we don't have to provide any. It means we need to work with you as a board to figure out, is there something required? And if so, what should we provide?
So this does say when commercial use is taking place on property in the rural residential district that abuts residential use, a 50-foot vegetative buffer shall be suitably planted and permanently maintained. Plantings will be no less than 50% evergreen for year-round screening. Additional setbacks may be required for compliance with other applicable regulations. That is section 104.5, sorry about that, Robin, E2.
But the caveat would be, does this consider commercial use?
Exactly.
We're not selling cars, we're not
So
selling
your own,
groceries.
your own
Yeah.
animal.
Okay.
Okay.
I just have a question about dry hydrant location. I assume there isn't one nearby, and I didn't see it in the fire department comments, but probably.
Good thought. Good thought. I know the fire department fights fires down there with their
We'll follow
utility
up.
vehicles and
Question.
other things.
I don't know about spraying water on a 5 megawatt.
Perhaps a baking soda hydrant.
Not an electrical engineer.
did watching safety videos as a kid.
Yeah.
I actually think there's one at Scandal in the middle, right at that pond,
I think you're right.
right at the end, I
I
can
can
almost
see
see
this
it,
very well.
where those power lines are. I think
Yeah.
there's a dry hydrant right there that runs down into that pond.
I think you're right. So maybe right across Mill Road.
Maybe right there, toll road, there may be a dry hydrant, right on Mill Road.
When you get things fairly well prepared, you'll probably have a technical review with a technical review group.
That we only call on a project-specific basis.
Okay. All right, we weren't aware that that was going to be a need. If that's required, then certainly. As we start to wind down the discussion this evening, I assume this is a continuance to a later date. And what would you like, what you are looking at here is obviously the results of our work from several weeks ago. There's been a lot that we've done in the background, graded the site, figured out our drainage, a lot of those other elements. We are hoping that we would be able to be resubmitting to you in the very near future. So I guess.
What is our deadline date for the June meeting?
Well, I believe this
Plans would have to be in for the June meeting
This would be continued.
by the 8th of June.
Can you meet that 8th of June deadline?
I see no reason why not.
Because this has only been noticed as design review, so if we're going to step into the actual site plan review application, then we need to notice it again. And we have the time to do that. And you paid the fees for I think most of it, maybe not about a notification a second time, Robin?
They pay the fee for the photo.
We have
Second
the,
notice.
we have the,
They did the first notice and then they put down the professional review fee.
right, so we have the $5,000 engineering bond, but we don't have the fees to cover notification and a butter notice for strictly a site plan review application, unassociated with site plan.
Let us know the cost.
But you do, we can do that for the June meeting.
What's the date of the June meeting? I apologize.
Tuesday the 20th.
Plans to be by the 8th.
Well, we'd love that opportunity, and if we're going to have the opportunity to meet again on the 20th, if you guys want to conduct a site walk, that we can also invite the Conservation Commission to.
Sidewalk? Or do you want to see the plans before the sidewalk?
There's not a lot more detail, in all honesty. Topography is going to be very similar to what you see today. The difference is going to be the stormwater management areas are now going to be included, and lots of additional details as far as the utilities.
Okay. It's your pleasure,
But
people.
if you're on site, you can say where those structures are gonna be. It's not, Dennis isn't going to do his review while walking on a sidewalk. He's good, he's not bad.
Anyone have a date? We have June 3rd and 4th, we have June 10th and 11th. I don't think we want to do it the week before because that is Memorial Day weekend.
That's a lot of stuff on the, that's the town light, yard sale,
It's the 10th, yes.
yeah, and a few other things. Celebration for the library,
Celebration for the library, you said?
Nichols Library,
Oh,
125th.
is that weekend? And that's definitely not.
I'm usually available, I'm available on the 3rd because I'm at a walk I'm doing in Washington DC. And on the next weekend, I'm at a family event in New York, so I'm not available either of those.
So how are we looking at the 17th, which would be right before our meeting, which would give us an opportunity to. 17th work for everybody? 8 a.m.?
I have a question mark, but I have a question mark every weekend.
It's going to be hit or miss for me, but as of right now, it's not.
Okay, let's try 8 a.m. on the 17th.
But the nice thing is I can at least, if I can't make it, I'll just have another select board representative at least attend it like that.
So, where are we gonna park? Where are we gonna start from?
Oh, in the, oh, big turnaround there.
Let's go park in their driveway. But just seriously, yeah, we need to think about how we're gonna handle that. If this is a class 6 road.
There is, it's good parking right at the end of Toll Road. There's a big loop of dirt road that you can park in. It's good hunter access.
In the right of way, isn't it? It's still kind of gravel in that right of way, as long as it isn't raining.
Yeah,
Should be able to get it around
that's pretty firm,
Okay.
sandy stuff.
the utility right of way.
We plan to meet right in that immediate vicinity of the utility right away. June 17th, 8 a.m.
8 is that what we said, 8 AM?
8 a.m. I'm gonna make you get up early.
That's a beautiful thing.
Won't be too hot. Should we?
The 17th, and the public, it'll be a noticed public meeting, and you're welcome to attend.
Yes. Exactly.
That's why I was asking, a lot of tips.
You should definitely form the conservation commission.
Yes, oh yeah, yeah.
Do we need to key in Conservation Commission, or is that something?
We'll
you
have the
guys-
Conservation Commission, they'll be invited to attend as well, yeah?
Do you want to invite the whole board of selectmen, or is just one representative appropriate?
No, because then we'd have to notice it as
because it would be a Yep.
meeting for us as well, so, but at least one member of the planning board will be in attendance.
Oh, the
Would be your
select board.
Select board. Them too.
Okay, so with all that, any further discussion? If none, do we have a motion to continue? Oh, no, because there won't be a motion to continue because we're done.
We are
Yeah.
going to renotice the site plan review.
So it's effectively continued to the 20th, but we
We won't-
acknowledge that it'll need to be.
You'll be on the
noticed.
agenda for the 20th if you get your plans in by the 8th.
Right, and then do we need a vote on the sidewalk, because it's a meeting, so
We
I'll
do.
move that we schedule a sidewalk for the Saturday, the 17th of June at 8 AM at the end of Toll Road's paved portion.
Second.
Okay? All those in favor? Opposed? And that again is unanimous. I've been pretty unanimous all evening. Definitely we should also invite some of the department heads.
This has been tremendously beneficial to us, and I hope it was informational for you guys too, and we look forward to the next meeting, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, nice job.
See you.
Okay, has everyone read the minutes of the April 18th meeting? And do we have a motion to accept them?
I'll move that we accept the minutes of April 15th, sorry, April 18th, with the following corrections. On line 5, where it says Mr. Coffin called the meeting to order, it should be Ms. Merrill. And on line 639, under department comments, that Public Works at the start of line 640. It doesn't say who made those comments. And those are the only two.
Okay.
Unless somebody else has.
Any other errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Second.
Oh,
Second, yeah, you did.
Second.
thank you. I thought I'd missed Robin. I thought you were so quiet over there. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. I don't have any correspondence. Any other business to legally come before the meeting?
Oh, I just got a quick question. Did RPC ever get back to you about the, I was reading the April 4th minutes again, our commitment to the stormwater regulations updates?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, and actually, they originally wanted to meet on the 6th. So I'm going to have to call and reschedule that, because we're gonna be busy this summer.
So we did invite the Historic District Commission to come to our next meeting to go over those plans. However, we have now contacted them because Summit has been continue to that night. We have notified them that we're gonna have to reschedule. So that has been rescheduled.
Now, Summit may continue from that meeting,
Yeah,
because they asked for that meeting on the premise that they were going to have a one-meeting ZBA approval, but I doubt that's gonna happen.
so,
If they don't get an approval at their meeting that Thursday before, they may very well ask us to continue.
so do we want, well, how do we want to handle the historic district then and RPC?
RPC's presentation at this point is predominantly informational. So we could keep them on the schedule.
Okay.
And if in fact we get a continuance, have them come in and do their presentation.
Let's do that, because that wouldn't be inconveniencing too many people if we had to suddenly cancel.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. Sounds good.
That was the only question I had.
All right. Anything else? Yes? No? Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We're adjourning at 9:43?
No,
8:40.